Pastor Jerry here with another book review. This one, Brave, Alistair Begg's Brave by Faith, God-Sized Confidence in a Post-Christian World. This is a great book. I enjoyed reading it. This is actually a book that my wife gave me for our anniversary. And so it was a book that I picked up. I read real quick. It's an enjoyable book. I look forward to reading it again. But it's a great book, just encouraging, especially in our current culture. It's just a great book to look at. But before we go much further into this and me sharing some of my thoughts, let me give some details about the book. So, uh, first of all, it's written by Alistair Begg. Some of you may know Alistair Begg. Alistair Begg has been in a pastoral since 1975. Following graduating from the London School of Theology, he served 8 years in Scotland at both Shaw Chapel in Edinburgh and Hamilton Baptist Church, which means he has that great Scottish accent. I tell you, I'll say this: if I could just listen to that Scottish accent, that's just great. I mean, it's one of those things. If we could have that Scottish accent or that Sean, it just sounds so good and makes him sound so much smarter. And I'm sure if I could have the accent, I'm sounding a lot smarter too. But he's just a great guy, especially since he's from that area. But we'll move on. I'm getting distracted here. Um, in 1983, he became the senior pastor of Parkside Church near Cleveland, Ohio. He has written several books and is heard daily and weekly on the radio program Truth for Life. The teaching of Truth for Life stems from the week by week Bible teaching at Parkside Church. And he's married to his wife, Susan, who were married in 1975, and they have 3 grown children, and I believe it was 8 grandchildren. And we'll see how many grandchildren he has. Also, he he is a current citizen of the United States in 2000 something. I forgot what it was. He officially became a citizen of the United States. I think it's 2004. And if you ever listen to his program, listen to teach, he has a great teaching style, great expositor to text, great way to personalize it, great stories. He's just a great pastor teacher. He's one of these guys I like to listen to. He also does a pastor's conference called Basics. Love to go to that at some point. I think that would be really a blessing. Love to meet in person. Me and my wife, and I'll have to do a review on this later on. There's a Bible devotion that he has written called Truth for Life also. I think it just likes putting Truth for Life for everything. But it's a great daily devotional that I would recommend. Maybe another time I'll go over that. And so he has some great material out there. Great pastor. So let's talk about this book. Just look at the cover. So what it says, what does it look like to live with joy in society that does not like what Christians believe or say or do? It's tempting to grow angry and keep our head down and retreat or just give up altogether. And just stopping there. That is, if I was to describe a lot of current conservative evangelical Christians, that's how they feel. They feel like they've given up, they feel weary, they've lost their joy, and so this is a great book because it's a really to help them get that joy and courage and understand the times better. So it goes on and says this. But this isn't the first time that God's people have had to learn how to live in a pagan world that opposes God rule. In this realistic yet positive book, renowned Bible teacher Alistair Begg examines the first 7 chapters of Daniel to show us how to live bravely and confidently and obediently in increasing secular society. And it must be that this is based on a sermon series, and if it was, one of these days I'll probably have to find that sermon series. But it's very excellent. And it was very positive, very encouraging book. I'll probably have my wife read this book next. I think she could use it herself. Um, and he goes on to readers will see that God is powerful and God is sovereign. And even in the face of circumstances that appear to be prevailing against his people, we may trust him entirely. We can be as brave as Daniel if we have faith in Daniel's God. And that's really the heart of it is where do we find that strength and power and confidence? And it's found in the God of the Bible. It's found in Yahweh, the God of Scripture. And that's where we find that strength. And how we do that? Well, that's what this book is about. Um, there's a quote from Alistair here, and I'll read that to you. The message of Daniel is incredibly relevant for us in our generation, not because it maps out a strategy for how to deal with our new lack of status, or because Daniel was a great man and we need to follow his example. The reason is that it will help us to believe in Daniel's God, Alistair Begg, author. And that's a great reminder. The book really is focusing on God, his sovereignty, and his power, and his ability, and how we respond to it. And to some degree, it's not about what we do, but what God has done. Um, and then there's several other pastors and teachers that have has applauded this book, but no more better than, of course, John MacArthur. So I'll give you John MacArthur's what he says. John MacArthur says, if anything seems to be missing or elusive in the lives of Christians today, it is the presence of courage. One of the virtues of courage is that it holds on to hope. Alistair Begg helps us all by taking us back to the notable Old Testament model for both hope and courage. The prophet Daniel, you'll be refreshed and strengthened by a fresh look at the young prophet and his friends as they face life-threatening hostility in a pagan world. And by the way, if you never listened to John MacArthur, you should. Great pastor, great teacher, really great expositor of the word. But what a great praise! And there's other authors that have really enjoyed this. But let's now look into the book. Let's see what the book has to say, and it's divided up in just 7 short chapters, as we see. So quite literally, you could read this in a week. Um, you probably read the intro, first chapter together, and chapter 7 conclusion together. Um, there's a short week read, and if you really need that burst of encouragement, this short book will help you do it. And the first thing, the winds has changed, is that's a good chapter because it reminds us that the Israelites have been brought into exile into Babylon, but this was God's sovereign plan. And that's a great reminder. The second one, know your lines. And this is where Daniel and his friends are tempted to eat the food from the king's table, which were your foods that they were not allowed to according to Jewish law, or may even been food sacrificed to idols. Either way, according to Jewish law, they weren't supposed to eat the food, and they stood behind God's law and says, no, we can't eat that. The next one, keep your confidence, and let me see if I remind myself. You read the book and try to remember what everything you read. Keep your confidence was the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, and that's the first one he has, and that's where he sees a statue that's you have the and it talks about the 4 kingdoms that will happen, and of course you have the statue of gold and bronze and eventually clay feet, and that through this prophecy, he basically tells Nebuchadnezzar eventually his kingdom will fall, and that there will be other kingdoms that are empires are going to come in and replace you, and that there is going to be a stone that's going to break it all up, and that would be Christ, that would be the Messiah, that's God. And so Nebuchadnezzar, don't think you're so highly. But the hard thing is he has to deliver this message to Nebuchadnezzar, a message of you're going to be a judge, and he has to keep his confidence and say what God told him to say. What was the interpretation of the dream? obey God despite consequences. And if I remember correctly, yeah, this is a story where he explains how the got the they're they're forced to going to have to worship a statue of Nebuchadnezzar, and they were supposed to worship him. And if they didn't, they were going to be thrown in the fire furnace. And we are called to be obedient to God despite what the culture, despite what, in this case, Nebuchadnezzar, the consequences may be, and we need to be brave despite that. And he talks about that. The second one, speak out, um, and I believe chapter 4 was, if I recall, that is where Nebuchadnezzar has another dream, and in this dream, again, he has to speak God's judgment. And this is one Daniel tells him, "You've been prideful, and that God has judged you." And this is where Nebuchadnezzar goes crazy for a while until uh, eventually um, he repents and he becomes uh, of his sin. Now, the question is, does he become a believer? Some indications of that, but that's one of the ones we won't know until we get to heaven. The next chapter, seeing through the glitter. And this is where there's a new king in town, and the letters and Belshazzar takes the utensils from the temple that were in Babylon and takes it and feasts on it. And God quite literally writes lettering in the wall, something they can't understand. And Daniel is brought forth. And by the way, now he's be a lot older at this point. And he has to tell him that judgment is going to happen. In fact, it happens that night. And despite this guy promised him wealth and gold and everything, Daniel says, I'll tell you the interpretation, but I don't want anything that you have to offer. And it's a great reminder that the world's going to promise everything if we say beneficial things for it. And truly, there are Christians, a lot of Christians have gone that way. Um, Chapter 6, I'm trying to remember what that one was. That was when. Oh, so. Okay, chapter 6, that's right. Chapter 6 is when, so the king, the new king, which is oh shoot, what's his name? He's now 80 years old, and this is the king Darius. Oh yeah, King Darius. I don't. So this is now King Darius. Daniel would be about 80 now. This is the third king that has ruled over this empire, and in this case, the satraps lays a trap for Daniel because they were jealous of Daniel, and the king Darius has showed approval to Daniel, and they set up a law that says, well, for the next month, if anyone was to worship anyone else other than you, king, let him be thrown in the lion's den. And Daniel is stands firm, and he does not. He does. Doesn't first. He doesn't worship the king, but more importantly, he continues to do what he would normally do, which is to say his daily prayers. And he would say 3 prayers a day, always in the same place, and a very publicly in the window. And so he was caught, and he's thrown in the lion's den, and God protects him. And what this is about is to stand firm. He knew his right to pray to God and only to God, and that he was not going to adjust his plan because his thought was, I want to do what God would want me to do. And so he prays to God. The 7th chapter that is where it starts the beginning of the rest of the book of Daniel about the judgment or the second coming that eventually happened. And what Alistair mainly focuses on there is the main point is that God wins. And we get a lot into the details and stuff, and sometimes we get so focused on that we miss that this is a pop the globe language that's trying to communicate the triumph of God over the evil. And so it is a section that's to give us encouragement and boldness, and to take heart that in the end God will win and things will be set right. Um, and of course, he last finish up with Jesus shall reign, and that's the final ending coming. But this book, so it goes to those different stories, and Alistair Begg explained how each one of those story points applies to your life and how it applies to your life, and does an excellent job there. And one of the things I like is because it takes a story that we're familiar with and creates an application that we can go with. A lot of times we read these stories and we're like, well, how does that relate to me? I mean, I'm not having to bow down and worship a God. And he shows how this can be very much related to us. So it is an excellent book, great encouragement, a great little devotional. The other thing I like about Alistair is always has some great resources. In the very back of the book, it has a little biography section, and he has some books that he would recommend. He actually mentions them in it. And so now he's just gave me more books to read, for better for worse. But one of these days I'll have to look at some of those books. But this is a great book. If you're looking for a book that's encouraging, if you need a book that'll give you some courage, some hope, to move forward, this is a great book. Highly recommend it. I think this would be a great book for a lot of men who need encouragement. If anything, I always say that being strong, courageous, God in particular has encouraged men to do that. This is not to say this book doesn't apply to women, it will, but I think in particular this would be a great book for men. So if you're looking for a great book for your husband or your boyfriend or your son, or even your grandfather, some man who needs some encouragement in their faith, this book is a great book to do that. And great birthday present, great anniversary present, great Christmas present. But I encourage you to pick up Alistair Begg, Brave by Faith, God-Sized Confidence in a Post-Christian World. God bless you. Have a great day. If you like these videos, please like, share, subscribe, and ring that bell. God bless you and have a good day.